Good evening, and welcome to our notes tonight on trouble over taxes. Our inquiry question is, how did the British laws affect the freedoms of colonists? We are working towards our objective of identifying and describing 8 events of the American Revolution. The taxes that you see here and the events surrounding it are some of the events you can talk about as we progress through our unit. Be sure to understand how each of these events led to future events as we go forward. So, with the end of the French and Indian War in 1763, came a new set of problems for the British and their colonies. They now controlled so much land that was occupied by very few settlers and many Native Americans. In order to prevent further conflicts and to protect natives, King George issued the Proclamation of 1763, which drew a line down the Appalachian Mountains forbidding colonists from moving west. However, this did little good, and colonists moved anyways. This issue was minor, though, compared to other problems facing England, such as major debt. King George needed to pay off the debt accumulated during the French and Indian War. He believed that since much of the fighting took place in the colonies, they should pay at least part of the bill. As a result, the King and Parliament issued 2 acts, the Sugar Act and the Stamp Act. The Sugar Act, passed in 1764, taxed all molasses. Molasses is a form of sugar entering the colonies. While this actually lowered the taxes on molasses from previous taxes, the old tax was seldomly collected. This new tax, however, was strictly enforced. A year later, in 1765, England passed the Stamp Act. This tax required a stamp on all legal documents, newspapers, land deeds, playing cards, and even dice. This tax, along with the Sugar Act, angered many colonists as they saw them as unjust. Many colonists began to grow frustrated with England. A new rally cry developed in the colonies: no taxation without representation. Some of the anger grew because England was placing taxes on colonists, but the colonists had no representation in Parliament. Throughout the colonies, riots erupted, mobs destroyed homes, and stamp collectors were run out of town. A prominent lawyer from Massachusetts described the scene this way: our presses have groaned, our pulpits have thundered, our legislature has resolved, our towns have voted, the crown officers everywhere trembled. In addition to these protests, each colony sent delegates to the Stamp Act Congress, which met in New York to petition the king to repeal the acts. The Congress enacted boycotts and refused to buy certain goods and services from England. As a result, British merchants suffered. Finally, in 1766, the British Parliament repealed or canceled the Stamp Act. So that concludes our notes on trouble over taxes. As you already know from class, we've identified other taxes and acts as well that the British put into place. The 2 biggest were the Stamp and the Sugar Act, in getting the colonies into an uproar. We will see the other acts just build on the emotions that were put in place because of the Sugar and Stamp Act. As we go forward, we should understand how these events and the boycotts and the mobs that developed lead to the revolution. How is it that these events actually cause a war to break out? What is it that the colonists want to escape? We'll be analyzing and looking into these more in the upcoming days and week. Have a good evening, and I will see you in class tomorrow.